Alright guys and gals, this is a long playing review for Stormlord on the Amstrad CPC, released by Hewson in 1989. And this is of course another classic game from legendary coder Raffaele Cecco, famous for his games like Equinox, Exolon and both Cybernoids, returning this time with a fantasy themed game moving away from space and sci-fi. Although this one, Stormlord, is perhaps more famous and overshadowed by the fact you could see 8-bit pixelated fairy boobies in a legit full price commercially released computer game from a proper software house, and your parents would have no idea. There didn't seem to be much controversy though, and the rather lackluster box art didn't really inspire or send pulses racing. Screenshots on the back look good, and look closely and you can see one of those fairies. And also, I never liked those stripy backgrounds Hewson did on their boxes. I think it makes them look rather cheap and budgety, not a full price premium product. No idea why they did that. Anyway, let's get the game booted up and get into it. Now, Stormlord is also well known from a technical and coding point of view as being excellent, as we would expect from Raffaele Cecco, and is also well known as being a really pretty and beautiful looking game, as you'll see from the loading screen here, which looks far better than the box art it's based on. And we'll hear some very lovely music here from Dave Rogers. And let's give you the story of the game, so give you a bit of a background as to what we're actually going to do in the game. And I'll just read out from the manual and the story as it is. So here we go. I'm going to read it out verbatim. So, free the imprisoned fairy folk before they are obliterated by an evil queen. She stoops to conquer the land Stormlord inhabits, destroying the peaceful euphoria with each annihilation. Stormlord's mission: free the captured and defend the peace and tranquility of his realm. Unfortunately, he must repel the wicked monarch, but should he fail, the queen and her dark sovereignty will reign forever. And then we move on to plain Stormlord. The game objective is to release the impounded fairies before time runs out. Each level of the game has a small number of fairies that must be released before you can progress on to the next level. Scattered about Stormlord's world are various objects that he must use intelligently to free the fairies and help get through certain parts of the world. To pick up an object or to swap an already held object with one on the ground, simply walk into it. Only time and practice will grace you with the knowledge of where to use certain objects and in what order they should be used, etc. You will encounter Venus flytraps, huge worms, flies, dragons and many more foes on your travels. All of these must either be destroyed or avoided at all costs. To gain access to far remote parts of the world, powerful springboards can be used to cover large distances in a few seconds. To use a springboard, simply step into the middle of it and you'll be propelled into the air. And there you go. And there are end of level sub games where all fairies have been released and Stormlord will have to throw love hearts at the fairies and catch their tears they cry if a love heart lands on a fairy, and capture 10 tears of a fairy that has cried, and you get a bonus life at the end. No, anyway, let's start the game off. A wolf whistle as you walk past one of the naked fairies there. Oh look, boobies and nipples in a game. Well, get over it. Get over it. Alright, free the nipple. Hashtag free the nipple. Look, wiggly worms there, avoid them. We just picked up a key, which will open a door, and there's our first teleporter, springboard. Woo, he's flying through the air. And there's our first fairy that we've rescued. There's the counter in the bottom right corner of the screen there. Rescued 1 of 5 fairies in the level. And we've just picked up an umbrella. An umbrella will protect us from the acid rain from these clouds here. That's the first puzzle we have to sort of solve in the game. Very, very simple puzzles, but we have a very, very tight time limit in the game. And this game is ridiculously hard. We have these like spawns of enemy waves that come at us and making this look a lot easier than it is. I got quite lucky there. The game barrages you with like waves of enemies. And the Amstrad version seems to be a lot tougher. They seem to spawn in a lot earlier than other versions of the game, and they seem to be a lot more aggressive. So I picked up a honey pot there and replaced the key with a honey pot to attract the bees over to the honey pot, which allowed me to get the third fairy there. Now I've got to shoot these eggs before they crack open and spawn a flying dragon. Or actually it's not a dragon, it's some horrible green demon creature. And those green demons will like home in on you and they're an absolute menace. So try and shoot them as quickly as you can. Now we've got to get that key there. There's an umbrella, which seems to be useless, but there's another honey pot. Oh, those platforms will disintegrate and there's a snapping plant below you don't want to land on. Swap the umbrella for the honey pot. Wait for the bees to move up. And then we can get that key there. There we go. Now, there's a fake door on this section coming up. And you can soft lock yourself. There's the fake door. Don't use the key on that door. Or you can soft lock yourself on this level and you can never escape. And get that fairy. So, yeah, that would be very, very annoying. And here's the bonus level. And that is the first level complete on Stormlord. Now you've got like a shoot 'em up level almost. Fire the love hearts in the air. You get 20 love hearts, but you've got to collect 20 tears. There's the first tier. And the second one. You can see the counter there to the right of the score there. We get 10 tears. And you get a bonus life. Now, the game rather generously starts you with 9 lives. You can tell this is going to be a very, very tough game. And I'm making this look very easy on the long play because I'm trying to do this without losing a life. One more tier to collect. There you go, we've done it. So, thankfully, in terms of research for this video, there's a lot out there with Raffaele doing interviews with Amstrad Action Magazine in their issue 43, and there's an in-depth making of the game in Retro Gamer Magazine issue 186. So any quotes from Raffaele here will likely be from either of those magazines. So as for the making this game, Raffaele says he was quite bored with the whole sci-fi space genre after doing Equinox, Exolon and both Cybernoid games. So went with doing something different here for Stormlord, this time with like kind of a fantasy setting. And was a bit inspired by what he was reading at the time, Lord of the Rings specifically. And apparently also the music he was listening to as well, which was Queen, the band Queen. In particular, some of the more obscure songs which made reference to fairies and other fantasy elements. Specifically, I believe one song in particular from Queen called My Fairy King from their self-titled album in 1973, which of course, the lyrics talk about fairies and magic. But there are specific lines there which are relevant to the game and make an appearance that I will quote now, which... honeybees have lost their stings, and then later on dragons fly like sparrows through the air. We saw some dragons earlier as well. Of course, one of the major obstacles in the game are the bees, which we had to lure away with honey pots. We saw that, and of course we saw the flying green dragons. It's another Queen song called March the Black Queen from Queen 2 from their second album in 1974. That made Raffaele think of the game of chess. That's why we saw the chess pieces of enemies to fight in the game. We just saw about 30 seconds ago, or a minute. And plus they kind of fit with the fantasy setting. So that's where Raffaele's headspace was when making this game. Raffaele also confirms that Hewson were very supportive of his ideas and taking risks, which is not uncommon to hear from coders who worked with Hewson. And Hewson are... always to be commended for that, and they don't get enough credit really for this. Hewson were a really, really great company for original games. Sadly, they didn't get the success they really deserved. In terms of gameplay features, Raffaele allowed the player to explore and take their own route to complete the level. And you will certainly start seeing this on levels 3, 4 and 5. Here we're on level 2. And a little sneaky shortcut here as I jumped over the teleporter. There we go. Saved a lot of time there. And so it's less linear than like the routes of Cybernoid and Exolon, his previous games. And yeah, the teleporters there are an important tool and feature for Raffaele because it kind of opened up the game to more puzzling and gameplay options. But it was still predominantly an action game, which was his preference. And the puzzles were still relatively simple. You know, it's like take key to door, unlock door, which he confirms. And you will see later on we got short and high jumps, which are kind of another important puzzle tool. But later on, I think from on this level, you need to find and pick up some special boots so you can jump higher. So that's another like little extra puzzle. There you go. Actually, this section here, just like if you just keep pushing left, the chess pieces, the knights, won't catch up with you, and just keep pushing right here, and you should be okay. There you go. Yeah, and there's also like short and long range attacks by holding down the fire button. So if you hold it down for longer, you actually fire out a sword rather than like these sort of like, I don't know what it is, raindrops? Oh, there's the boots I was talking about. Now you can jump extra high if you need to. I think Raffaele with the attacks here. I'm not really going to show it. Oh, there's the sword. Yeah, I accidentally fired it there. I think it was trying to make it less frustrating for the player. By trying to keep it simple, allowing the player to complete the game with only one weapon, and giving the possibility of having more power to the weapon. I'm not sure it really kind of works here as well as he hoped. More on that later. Anyway, wolf whistles and naked fairies. Regarding any fuss or controversy regarding naked fairies in the game, all Raffaele has said about it is that he doesn't understand what all the fuss was about, and that there's nothing more to see than what you'd get in any Renaissance painting or other fantasy art. He thought it fitted in well with all the other graphics, and there was nothing gratuitous about it. Plus, it wasn't really his intention to cause any kind of controversy or generate publicity because of it. Anyway, it didn't really seem to happen. It didn't really seem to increase sales of the game. Hewson didn't really try to capitalise on it. And it was reviewed well, but apparently the game didn't sell as well as Exolon or Cybernoid after all that. So there you go. And that's really kind of all I found out about what Raffaele has said about the game. He has done interviews on podcasts and other YouTube videos. I've not really watched and listened to them. I think the Retro Hour podcast did a nice interview with him. That might be worth checking out and listening to on YouTube. But that's sort of the extent of what I've dug into for what Raffaele has said. But we'll move on from that. Other bits of interesting bits I've found out. Apparently Raffaele insisted on retaining a veto over the packaging and promotional material of the game, apparently, which is quite unusual for a coder to have such power at the time in the 80s, late 80s, almost early 90s. But Raffaele had that at Hewson. Well, that's testament to Hewson. Although I'm not very impressed by the advert and box art they had at the time, as I mentioned earlier in the video. And also, Raffaele had started Stormlord before Cybernoid 2, but I had to take 3 months out when Hewson requested the Cybernoid sequel. So I went back to do Cybernoid 2 before coming back to finish Stormlord. There you go. Now, I can't believe we're already at the final level of the game. I haven't really talked a huge amount of the gameplay and what's going on, but I guess you can pretty much figure out and see what's happening here. Do I have any real gameplay tips? Not really. It's all about your reactions and obviously following the route here. There are different ways of tackling some of the later levels. Some people have different paths they want to take. There's probably about 3 different ways you can probably tackle this level if you want to. You've got to watch out for the timer here. And there's a very, very tight time limit. Let's look at magazine reviews at the time. So this was reviewed in the July 1989 issue 46 of Amstrad Action magazine, and they heaped massive amount of praise on its graphics and presentation, and also for its music and just all-round quality, making note that even peripheral details have had as much care lavished on them as the game. That doesn't go unnoticed by me either. Of course, most importantly, they also praised the depth of the gameplay. Oh god, I hate this bit here. These chess pieces. This killed me so many times on this level. And I had to redo it over and over and over and over and over again just to get past this bit. Yes, and I quote again, not only do your reactions get a real workout, but the puzzles add greater depth that require the grey matter to be in gear as well. The puzzles are pretty simple. However, of course, they comment the game may be too tough, and only very briefly mentioned the naked fairies in a screenshot comment as the seedier side of Stormlord, and what a pity. But leave it as that. Anyway, they rated the graphics at 96%, the sonics at 84%, grab factor 73%, with staying power at 85%, with an overall AA rating of 92%. As for my review, the Amstrad version is arguably the brightest and boldest graphically of the 8-bit versions, and we'll have to do our comparison to the other versions of the game at the end of the video, because I don't have time. We're about to complete it. Anyway, so I think the best graphically of the 8-bit versions, I think that's for sure. It's also arguable that it may be the hardest. I've not played through the Speccy and the C64 versions for a large amount of time, maybe just the first couple of levels. Oh, it's the final fairy! There we go! We have completed Stormlord! And we get a bonus level. Let's see what happens after the bonus level. Yeah, I've only played the Speccy C64 versions for maybe the first couple of levels, but it seems that the enemy wave spawns on the CPC may seem to come in earlier and are more aggressive in most cases. I may be wrong or fooling myself, or it may just differ between the versions in different places. But I think with all 3 8-bit versions all being so strong, and with only minor differences between them, I honestly can't say which is the best. And I think they all stand shoulder to shoulder next to each other. But let's just now focus on the Amstrad version. It's a stunning piece of game design, coding and art coming together in symmetry, joining forces to produce an end product so high in quality. Oh, do we get an ending? No. The game just loops to level 1. That's a shame. Yeah. Oh dear. I'll just kill myself and get into the high score table. No ending? And it loops? That's a bummer. That is a bummer. And it's also let down. The game is let down, unfortunately, by the frustration factor. The levels are short and there aren't that many levels, 5 in total. So it had to be made tough. I guess memory constraints was a factor here too. Perhaps the game could have benefited from longer levels, more spaced out, and being made, dare I say it, a multi-load? I know people hated them back in the day, especially on cassettes, but maybe it would have made a less frustrating experience from just having to be barraged by a wave of enemies just to make it tough for the player who's armed with an annoying arced shooting weapon that fires in slowish salvos. The ability to charge up your weapon is almost next to useless in these situations because it should be able to cut through multiple enemies, but instead your charged up sword weapon will just disappear after hitting the first enemy. Changing it to take out a whole row of enemies and baddies would have been a game changer and would be a simple thing to tweak. That's my thoughts there. Obviously, I'm perhaps making this long play look easier than it actually is because it's a long play, but this was incredibly tough and painfully annoying to record and do. Even just the first level to beat without dying was, my god guys, just I had to record myself over and over and over repeatedly, hours and hours at a time until I did it. But what elation when I finally did. Oh, lovely music on the high score table. There are some incredibly annoying, frustrating bits that really you do need a bit of luck to get through without taking a hit and losing a life, if you want to do it like I have. And the game does give you a generous 9 lives with the ability to earn more on the bonus section for collecting 10 fairy teardrops. So now, most magazines back in the day gave it a 90% rating, being wowed by presentation and coding and all that. I'm tempted to go for a high 80% rating, like an 88 or an 89%, just due to the frustration and not getting the gameplay and difficulty balance right, and lack of an ending. But I think due to the stunning efforts put into this, with the coding, presentation, music, graphics, I think it just about deserves that 90% rating on the nose, and a 9 out of 10 from me. So yeah, go on then, 90%, just. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, 90% from me. So I think normally I do my comparison to the other versions during the game and the video about halfway through, but because we completed this fairly quickly within like about 17-18 minutes mark, we'll have to do this at the end of the video. So let's talk about the other versions of the game. We'll have some footage maybe of the Amstrad version running just so you can compare. So we'll start with the ZX Spectrum, the original and first version finished by Raf, and obviously it's very similar to the Amstrad version, although weirdly graphics and screen layout seem a bit wider on the Amstrad, which may make sense with it being in mode 0, with the pixels being fatter and wider. I felt slightly more claustrophobic playing the Specky version, and I'm not saying that's a negative thing, just an observation. One difference, though, is the Specky scroll was slightly smoother, but I did have to keep switching back and forth between footage to compare, and then put them side by side to analyse. It's that close. But it is true. However, despite how wonderfully colourful the Specky version is, it can't beat how gloriously colourful and lovely the graphics are on the CPC version. It also seems to be slightly easier than the CPC version in places. Now, the Commodore 64. The C64 version gets an additional tune during loading and a marvellous new Jerome Tell tune on the title screen and another in-game. I have to say, in-game the graphics are lovely and colourful on the C64, and of course it moves and scrolls really smoothly, but weirdly lacks the parallax scrolling of the stars that the Specky and CPC had. Oh yeah, shout out to the Amstrad version for parallax scrolling. I didn't mention that. Anyway, the C64 could have easily pulled off some parallax there, surely. But it's another superb conversion, although it feels a little easier. Whilst the lack of the stars is a bit of a bummer, you do have a really atmospheric tune in the background, and honestly all three 8-bit versions stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, and I'm not going to pick one out above the other. All three are kind of equal to each other, just like some slight differences between each other really. Now, onto the 16 bits, and we start with the Atari ST, and we get a new intro screen. Into the game, and of course we get upgraded visuals, but it keeps the basic level layout and gameplay structure. The intensity of the enemies has been cranked down a notch though, but to add value you get 2 new levels set in a castle, but it doesn't have Raph's same gameplay design genius. Still a decent port. Now the Amiga pretty much gets a straight ST port as expected, but it runs a little smoother, but with better audio and fantastic sound effects as expected. But the big new addition is, instead of a springboard for a teleporter, you now have an eagle that carries you across across the land between the teleporter platforms, which actually makes more sense and looks really cool. So that is definitely the better version. PC DOS. Very similar again to the Amiga version, which has the eagle carrying you about, only let down by its audio abilities, which is of course lacking. So we get a poor tune on its loading screen, then sparse and poor sound effects in game. Not much more to say here really, not something you're going to rush out to get running when you have superior versions elsewhere. And I struggle to get it running in DOSBox at the right speed, which may not be entirely correct here anyway. And we move on to finally the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis. Probably the strongest of all the 16-bit versions, purely down to the fact that it has both sound effects and music in game, which is excellent, and it utilises the 3 buttons on the controller pad, with the 3rd button used to pick up objects rather than the sometimes frustrating at times walking into an object to pick up or swap around that can sometimes lead to errors and deaths of all the other versions. It also allows you to continue games from higher levels when you die. Although the bonus level has been changed and is rather disappointing, where you simply have to move left and right to catch falling fairies in a bubble. Why that was changed to something so simplistic and crap, I have no idea. So it's a toss-up between the Amiga and Mega Drive version as to which is the best 16-bit one. And that is all the versions of Stormlord I've come across. If I missed any, do let me know in the comments. Of course, it's appeared on other systems, re-released like on Antstream and probably on mobile phones and stuff. But those, we're just looking at the legit, proper conversions and ports to legit systems, as in standalone proper consoles and computers. There you go. So that's Stormlord on the Amstrad CPC. Just straight 90% on the nose from me. Thank you very, very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please give us a like and a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. And please consider supporting me on Patreon and joining the Am Squad if you feel like that and you want to suggest new videos and long plays and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for watching and see you all again very soon. Goodbye. Bye.
So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please click a like below, leave a comment, and also subscribe if you haven't already. And over that way, there's another video for you to check out. Zypho, out.